All right, so let's dive right into this pretty major political shakeup happening over in Lagos State, Nigeria. We're talking about the impeachment of Mudashiru Obasa,
Right.
the former Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that it's not just another headline, you know. This could really change how power is working in the assembly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what really jumps out is how this impeachment, went down. It wasn't even close.
Right.
We've got this article from the Investigator, just came out a few days ago on January 27th, 2025, and it says the vote to remove Obasa was 35 to 5 back on January 13th.
Wow, that's a landslide. That's it's pretty decisive. Makes you wonder what could have been going on behind the scenes to get that kind of a result against him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, right? What led to this? The article mentions gross misconduct and abuse of office, but
Right, those are pretty vague.
yeah, they're pretty broad. And the fact that we don't have the specifics of the accusations, that's almost as interesting as the accusations themselves. What exactly was he doing that would make people turn against him like that?
Yeah, it's definitely leaves a lot of room for us to speculate. Now, on a different note, this whole thing has also led to a historic first for Lagos State.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Mobisola Miranda, the former deputy speaker, she's stepped into the role, and she's become the first woman to ever be the speaker.
Huge, huge development.
Hmm.
I'm really interested to see how this fits into the bigger picture of Nigerian politics.
Yeah.
Some people might say, oh, it's just symbolic, but could this be a sign of real change? Like, are we going to see more women in leadership?
Yeah, I mean, some critics will definitely say it's just one position,
Right.
but it's still, a pretty big crack in that glass ceiling.
Oh, for sure.
Now, let's talk about Obasa's reaction. He's not been quiet about it. He's saying the impeachment process was all messed up, the allegations are baseless, and that they were just targeting him because he wants to move up in politics. What do you think? Typical politician trying to save face, or could there be something to it?
Well, there's always some truth in what politicians say, right?
Right.
I mean, he's been around the block a few times. This is a classic move, play the victim, make everyone question things. That
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean he's necessarily lying either. We need more information.
Oh,
We got to look at the evidence or the lack of it before we can really say.
yeah, for sure. He also addressed those rumors about him wanting to be governor.
Hmm.
He said, and I quote, "Having an ambition to become a governor is not a sin," but he denied that he's planning on going up against Governor Sanwo-Olu right now. Do you think he's being straight with us?
Well, just because he's denying any immediate plans, that doesn't mean he doesn't have the ambition, right?
Mm.
It's a carefully worded statement. He's acknowledging that he wants to climb the ladder, but without directly challenging the current governor.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes you think.
Adds another layer to the whole power struggle thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did they see him as a threat? Did they think he was getting too powerful, whether he was actually going for the governorship or not? It's worth looking into, that's for sure.
Okay, so we have this huge political drama happening. A powerful guy is out of office, accusations are flying around, and yet the assembly itself is acting like everything's normal.
Right.
They say they followed all the rules and that nothing has changed in how they do things.
Mhm.
It almost feels a little too casual given what just went down. What do you make of that?
It does feel a little detached, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like they're downplaying how big a deal it is to get rid of their speaker. Maybe they want to seem stable, like everything's under control, even with this upheaval. Or maybe they really believe they can just switch to a new leader and keep going like nothing happened.
Yeah. It's a strange contrast, isn't it? All this drama with the impeachment and then this business as usual attitude. Something tells me it's not going to be that simple.
Right. Especially with those gubernatorial elections coming up.
Exactly. So, what do you think? How's this all going to play out? What are we going to see happen because of this?
Well, one thing's for sure, Obasa's impeachment is going to change things in Lagos politics. You can't remove someone that powerful and expect everything to stay the same.
So, what kind of changes are we talking about? What should we be looking for?
That's where things get really interesting.
It really does feel like things are about to change in a big way over there in Lagos State. We've got a new speaker in Mohisola Miranda, and
Yeah.
we've got that power vacuum because of Obasa's impeachment. And then on top of it all, those gubernatorial elections are coming up. It's a lot to take in. Where do we even start with all of this?
Well, why don't we start with Mohisola Miranda? I mean, you mentioned earlier how big a deal it is that she's the first woman to be speaker in Lagos State.
Right.
But, besides just the historical significance of it, what does this actually mean for the assembly going forward? What kind of leader is she likely to be? And will her priorities be different from what Obasa was focused on?
Yeah, that's a good point. We've been spending a lot of time talking about Obasa and why he was removed, but now we need to look at Miranda. The problem is the article doesn't really tell us much about her, like her background or what she stands for politically. What can you tell us about her based on your experience with Lagos politics?
Well, from what I've seen, Miranda has a reputation for being pretty pragmatic. She's someone who tries to get consensus, bring people together. She's known for being able to work with people from different parties and find solutions that everyone can live with, even on complicated issues. That could be a big change from Obasa's style, which some people saw as, well, a little more forceful and sometimes even divisive.
So we might see a less combative approach to governing then with Miranda in charge, more cooperation.
Yeah, possibly.
But does that mean that things will actually change in Lagos State? I mean, what kind of policies is she likely to support?
It's hard to say for sure this early on, but if we look at what she's done in the past and the political climate right now, I think it's possible that we'll see more emphasis on social welfare programs, education, and improving infrastructure. Those were areas where Obasa's administration got a lot of pushback, especially from the opposition. Miranda might see those issues as a way to make her mark, set herself apart, and gain more support.
That makes sense. If she can make real improvements in those areas, it would definitely strengthen her position
Yeah.
and could even make her a major player in future elections.
Exactly, exactly. And we can't forget that she's the first woman in this role. That's going to have some kind of impact on how the assembly functions, how
Yeah.
they make decisions.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
She might be more sensitive to issues that affect women directly or marginalized groups, and that could definitely change the assembly's focus when it comes to policy.
That's an interesting perspective. We haven't even talked about what this could mean for women in Nigerian politics as a whole. Could this be the start of something bigger? Are we going to see more women breaking through those barriers and taking on leadership positions?
It's possible, for sure. If Miranda is successful as speaker, it could inspire other women to run for office, to challenge the way things have always been done.
Right.
It could even create a path for more women to get into government at all levels, leading to a more diverse and representative political system.
Now, that would be a real legacy for her.
Definitely.
But let's be real, we can't ignore the big thing that's looming over everything.
Yeah.
The gubernatorial elections. How do you think this impeachment and the new speaker are going to affect that race?
That's the question everyone wants to know the answer to,
Mhm.
right? There's no doubt that Obasa being removed has shaken things up. It's like this power vacuum has opened up, and different groups are going to be fighting to fill it.
Hmm.
We have to watch closely over the next few months to see how this all plays out.
So what specifically should we be looking for as we get closer to those elections? What are the clues that'll tell us how things are changing?
Well, endorsements are going to be key. Who's supporting Miranda? Who's distancing themselves from Obasa?
Yeah.
Are there any alliances forming that we didn't see coming? Those kinds of shifts can really show you how the political landscape is changing.
It's like they're sending signals, trying to position themselves without being too obvious about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate how the media is portraying all this. Are they saying Obasa was a victim of political games? Or are they focusing on those allegations of misconduct? The way this story is told is going to shape how the public sees it, and that could influence how people vote.
It's a good reminder that politics isn't just about what people do, but also about how people see what they do. The story can be just as powerful as the actions themselves.
Absolutely. And as we get closer to the elections, I think we're going to see this impeachment playing out in more subtle ways, too. Look at the policies coming from the assembly. Are their priorities shifting? Are they changing how they spend money? Those could be signs of how power is really working now.
That's a really good point. It's not just about the big announcements, it's about the day-to-day decisions that show you where the power lies. So it sounds like we've got a lot to watch for over the next few months, but with all this focus on politics and power struggles, what does it all mean for the average person in Lagos State? Why should they care about what's going on in the assembly?
That's a great question. At the end of the day, these power struggles in the assembly have real consequences for people's lives. The policies they pass, how they spend money, all of that directly affects everyday citizens. Who has power in the assembly matters because it shapes the future of the state.
So what you're saying is that even if someone isn't really into politics, they should still pay attention to this because it's going to impact them one way or another.
Exactly. Education, healthcare, infrastructure, all of those things are affected by what the assembly does. Staying informed about what's happening in politics allows people to hold their leaders accountable and fight for the things that matter to them.
You've definitely given us a lot to think about. It's not just about who the speaker is, it's about what direction Lagos State is headed in.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe there are even more surprises waiting for us as this story unfolds.
Oh, I have a feeling there are. Politics in Lagos State is never boring. But before we go too far down the speculation rabbit hole, let's take a step back and recap what we've learned. We've got this historic impeachment, a new era for the assembly with Mojisola Miranda leading the way, and tons of questions about what's next.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, this story is still developing. We're just at the beginning of what could be a huge turning point for politics in Lagos State.
Okay, so I know we're wrapping things up soon, but there's one last question I want to throw out there for our listeners to think about.
Hit me with it. I always like a good challenge.
So we've talked about how this impeachment might impact the upcoming elections, but what about the bigger picture, the long-term effects? Could this event actually change the entire political landscape in Lagos State for years to come?
Wow, yeah. That's definitely something to think about. Who knows, maybe in a few months or even years we'll look back at this and see how it all played out.
I have a feeling we will. Politics in Lagos State always seems to find a way back into the headlines. But for now, we'll leave our listeners to ponder that question and come to their own conclusions. And of course, keep following the Vestigator and other good sources to stay up to date on this story as it unfolds. It's a fascinating one.
Great advice. Remember, everyone, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better you can understand what's going on in the world around you. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the impeachment of Mudashiru Obasa.
It's been a really interesting discussion. We've looked at the immediate effects, talked about what might happen in the future, and even touched on what this means for politics in Lagos State as a whole.
And we've uncovered a lot of questions that still need answers along the way. That's what makes this whole story so captivating, you know? It reminds us that politics is always changing, and you never know what's going to happen next.
Exactly. It's like this puzzle that's always evolving, and we're all trying to figure out the bigger picture as we get more pieces. And as we've said, this particular puzzle could end up reshaping politics in Lagos State in some pretty big ways. So, as we leave our listeners to think about all the implications of this impeachment, what's the one thing you really want them to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway here is the importance of staying informed. Whether you follow the news closely, have good discussions about these issues, or you just try to understand what those in power are doing, knowledge is essential for navigating the complexities of the world around us.
Couldn't agree more. The more informed we are, the better we can hold our leaders accountable and create the future we want.
And who knows, maybe some of our listeners will be inspired to dig even deeper into this story, do their own research, ask their own questions, and come to their own conclusions.
That's what we love to see. Critical thinking and a desire to learn are so important for a healthy and engaged society. So, to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those brains working.
And until next time, keep diving deep.
We've talked about so much in this deep dive. You know, the historical significance of the impeachment, the new speaker, and the potential for some pretty big shifts in the political landscape in Lagos State. But it still feels like we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to this story. I bet there are going to be a lot of surprises along the way.
Yeah, I agree. We're in this time of transition and uncertainty right now, and that always leads to, possibilities for things to get better, but also for things to go wrong. It's kind of like watching a chess match where the main players have just made these really bold moves, and now we're all just sitting here waiting to see what the next move is going to be.
So who are the players we need to be watching in this game of chess?
Well, obviously, Mojisola Miranda is right in the middle of it all. What she does as a leader is going to be so important, not just for the assembly, but maybe even for who wins the gubernatorial elections. But we also have to remember all those other groups in the assembly.
Right.
The ones who wanted to see Obasa impeached, the ones who stayed loyal to him, and the ones who are still trying to decide where they stand now that things have changed. They're all going to be trying to grab as much power and influence as they can.
It's like they're all just holding their breath, waiting to see what's going to happen next before they make a move.
That's exactly. And that's what makes this so interesting. Politics is always changing, always moving. There are always going to be winners and losers, alliances shifting around, and the balance of power can flip just like that.
And right now, the stakes are really high. We're talking about the future of Lagos State, one of the biggest and most important economic centers in all of Nigeria. The choices that are made in the next few months are going to be felt all across the country.
No doubt about it. And that's why people need to stay informed and involved. Don't just sit back and watch. Be part of the conversation. Speak your mind, and make sure your elected officials know what you think.
Like they say, knowledge is power. The more we know, the better we can deal with the world around us and fight for the changes we want to see.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So, as we finish up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a bit of a challenge.
I'm all for a challenge. What do you got?
Don't just take everything you hear at face value. Dig a little deeper. Ask those tough questions. Come to your own conclusions. Remember, there's always more than one way to look at things, and the truth is usually a lot more complicated than it seems at first.
That's so true. We shouldn't just be accepting whatever information is thrown at us. We should be helping to shape the narrative. So, to all our listeners out there, keep exploring this story, question everything, and talk about it with your friends, your family, your communities.
Yeah, get those discussions going. The future of Lagos State is ultimately up to his people. By staying informed, getting involved, and taking charge, you can help create the future you want to see.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we've come to the end of our deep dive into the impeachment of Mudashiru Obasa. It's been a wild ride.
It has. We've analyzed what happened, what it might mean for the future, and even what it says about politics in Lagos State in general.
We've also raised a ton of questions that don't have answers yet, and I think that's part of what makes this whole thing so fascinating. Politics is unpredictable. There are always twists and turns.
Exactly. It's constantly evolving, and it's up to us to keep up.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another exciting exploration of the world around us.
Until then, keep asking questions and keep diving deep.